There's a ton of different solutions for immersive and spatial audio, and they all seem to have their own solutions for binaural listening over headphones. We're going to do an apples to apples comparison between a bunch of those formats, specifically Dolby Atmos, Sony 360, RO3D, mpeg-h, YouTube VR, and Facebook 360. We'll also talk about some of the different creative features between those formats, so strap yourself in for the most comprehensive comparison of these formats yet. First, I want to quickly disclaim why certain formats are not included. The biggest one missing is DTS:X, which is the main competitor to Atmos in the cinema space. Unfortunately, the software is just too expensive to justify purchasing for a single video. DTS seems primarily interested in the cinema space, which, when it comes to content, means there's not as much application for most creators either. I'm also not looking into Windows Sonic or Apple's binaural renderings. Both are unique solutions, but they're built on top of some of the other solutions that we'll be looking at. So let's talk about the formats we are comparing. We can essentially sort them into two categories: ADM solutions and ambisonic solutions. Atmos, Sony 360, RO3D, and mpeg-h are all built on the audio definition model, which is an open format for storing object-based sound and metadata. This and other standardization gives them a lot of intercompatibility in the cinema and broadcast worlds. YouTube and Facebook VR are built on ambisonics, which is a sound field synthesis solution rather than object-based, and it's also free and open as it's been around since the 70s. YouTube and Facebook also offer their tools for free, although Facebook has ditched support for their spatial workstation software. Fortunately, we can still demo Facebook's binaural solution using Dear VR tools. The RO3D and mpeg-h toolsets are available for free with registration and will run on both Mac and Windows, although RO3D lacks many features unless you're using Pro Tools on macOS, and some features require a subscription. Dolby also recently added full Windows support for their renderer, but you need two separate computers to run it. The standalone application costs $300, but most of the renderer's features are also available in host applications like Steinberg Nuendo and Blackmagic Design DaVinci Resolve, which can run natively on Windows. Sony offers their software for $500 and, like the others, support macOS and recently added Windows support. Let's break down some of the features that make these solutions unique on the creation side. First, there's nothing too special about YouTube and Facebook, as neither has content creation tools other than the binaural renderer, so you'll need some generic ambisonics toolset like ATK or O3A. Both solutions are designed to work with 360 video, so you'll also need video editing tools and Google's Spatial Media Metadata Injector. YouTube supports first-order ambisonics, which, with only 4 channels, does not have the best spatial resolution. Facebook supports second order, which has 8 or 9 channels depending on the implementation, and thus better imaging. The rest of the solutions utilize objects, typically combined with channel-based beds. Beds are pretty much identical across all formats, with only some minor differences in the preferred speaker layout, so we'll focus on the different features supported by objects. RO3D supports up to 128 objects for cinema mixes and 64 objects for home mixes. Objects can be panned in 3D, although not below the horizontal plane, and you can control the spread to allow the object to play from multiple speakers. There's also a snap option that always plays the object from a single speaker rather than panning it between multiple speakers. You can even limit the object to certain groups of channels. For example, if you want to make sure that it doesn't play through the height channels. A metadata selection option allows you to specify what type of content the object is, and you can also specify a language for dubbing or broadcast purposes. You can then group objects and beds in order to monitor parts of the mix separately. Lastly, you have the option to add interactivity. For example, you could allow the user to adjust the dialogue volume. You could also create a switch group, for example, to allow the user to select between multiple commentary languages. These features are supported by the newest TV broadcast standards. mpeg-h has all of those interactivity features while supporting up to 128 objects, and also allows you to give the end user the option to adjust the 3D panning of objects. Personally, I think that feature is a bit contrived, but it does exist. mpeg-h does lack some of the more sophisticated 3D panning options, offering only azimuth and elevation controls, but you can pan below the horizontal plane. You can also allow certain channels to bypass binauralization. For example, if you don't want voiceover affected by the HRTF. Dolby Atmos is not short on features, although it eschews the interactivity options. Like mpeg-h, Atmos supports up to 128 objects, and you can group those objects together as you see fit. Like RO3D, you can control object size, snap it to the closest speaker, and you can't pan below the horizontal plane. Atmos also adds the option to specify how you want objects binauralized on headphones. Objects can be placed at a fixed near, mid, or far position, or can have binauralization disabled entirely. Sony 360 is more focused for music creation, so it also lacks the interactivity options and has a fairly simple 3D panning toolset. You can control object gain, azimuth, elevation, and also the width of stereo objects. On one hand, you get unlimited objects, but on the other hand, there is no option for beds. I would love to compare features on the consumer side as well, but unfortunately, all of these formats are incredibly inconsistent depending on your listening platform, and they are also changing rapidly as software and hardware support evolves. Now, let's get into the tests. I have two pieces of content we're going to demo. The first is an electroacoustic music composition, which features immersive nature recordings, different musical and synthetic elements, some of which are panned around in 3D space. Second, I've got a media demo which contains recordings and effects to illustrate the different possibilities of immersive content. Both of these were mixed with Steinberg Nuendo, which allows me to output an identical mix with each of the formats. Where possible, I've used features unique to a particular format that will enhance the results, such as the object distance feature in Atmos. I've also normalized the files to make sure loudness isn't a factor in the final results. I've used shortened versions of the tracks to keep this video from getting excessively long. If you'd like to listen to full-length, uncompressed versions of the demos, they are available on my Patreon. Try to listen to the width. Does it sound wide or narrow, and does it start to sound phasey and less coherent? Are you able to get a sense of front and back separation, a sense of sound above you? Also, pay attention to the overall tone and whether it sounds natural, especially with the voiceover. Lastly, hopefully, obviously, this is all binaural content, so you'll need to listen on headphones. The effect won't work properly on speakers. What if you could take your voice and put it right in someone's ear? What if you could take a virtuoso, give it a new spin, then send it off on a skyward jet? What if you could transport a listener somewhere new, like a gentle stream with distant thunder? What if you could take your voice and put it right in someone's ear? What if you could take a virtuoso, give it a new spin, then send it off on a skyward jet? What if you could transport a listener somewhere new, like a gentle stream with distant thunder? What if you could take your voice and put it right in someone's ear? What if you could take a virtuoso, give it a new spin, then send it off on a skyward jet? What if you could transport a listener somewhere new, like a gentle stream with distant thunder? What if you could take your voice and put it right in someone's ear? What if you could take a virtuoso, give it a new spin, then send it off on a skyward jet? What if you could transport a listener somewhere new, like a gentle stream with distant thunder? What if you could take your voice and put it right in someone's ear? What if you could take a virtuoso, give it a new spin, then send it off on a skyward jet? What if you could transport a listener somewhere new, like a gentle stream with distant thunder? What if you could take your voice and put it right in someone's ear? What if you could take a virtuoso, give it a new spin, then send it off on a skyward jet? What if you could transport a listener somewhere new, like a gentle stream with distant thunder? So hopefully you were able to draw your own opinions, and feel free to go back and jump around between the different formats to really isolate the differences. YouTube had a very natural tone, lacking the high-end boost that the other formats had. Unfortunately, it also felt very narrow and constrained. The sense of front-back separation and height was not very strong. Facebook was very mid-heavy. It also felt wide, but to the point of starting to become phasey and disconnected, although the ASMR effect sounded excellent. I felt it had strong front-back separation, but the sense of height was not exceptional. RO3D was fairly natural, although a bit strong in the upper mids. All of the object-based solutions had some artificial reverb, but RO3D was by far the most dramatic with it. The sense of width was about average, but I found the front-back separation was really good and the sense of height was solid. Atmos was quite natural sounding, although bright. It also had noticeably more sub-bass than some of the others. The ability to bypass binauralization allowed me to get much more natural sounding voiceover, and that was true for mpeg-h as well. The width felt average, and the front-back separation was okay, but I did find the sense of height was very strong. Like Atmos, mpeg-h felt natural, a bit bright and heavy on the sub-bass. Width was fine, the front-back separation and sense of height were actually really good. For whatever reason, I experienced some glitches when panning objects in circles as they went past the crossover point of the control. Sony 360 suffered this a bit as well, but mpeg-h was very noticeable. You probably heard some glitches in the demo as things were panning around behind you. Sony 360 had the brightest tone by far, and there was some weird stuff in the mids that was especially noticeable on the dialogue. Bass was also lacking compared to the others. Width was good, if a bit phasey, as was the front-back separation. I got a solid sense of height, even on objects that weren't panned up. I expected to hear a bit more difference in the localization of moving objects, but I found all the formats were about the same, with maybe a slight edge to Facebook 360 if I had to pick a winner. Anyway, that's it for this video, a very in-depth comparison, so hopefully you learned a lot, and if you did, definitely hit that like button. If not, feel free to hit the dislike button. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave those down in the comments section down below, whether they're thoughts on what you listened to here, or ideas for future videos, or any other comments you have. And as always, if you want to see more videos like this, definitely hit that subscribe button.